It's time once again for another episode of Wantrepreneur Radio. Broadcasting live from the Pro Business Channel studios in Atlanta. And now here's your host, mark-myette.
Hello, everyone. Mark-myette coming to you live, or if you're listening to the podcast from beautiful Atlanta, GA, where it is sunny and no snowflakes in the air or the ground, so we are safe. Rich, how are you today?
Unbelievable. You're right. I mean, it's we say it's better in Buckhead and beyond Atlanta, around the world. I mean, it's just a good time to be in business and talk about entrepreneurship. And in this case, Wantrepreneur.
Yes. And
you're definitely the go-to guy. And we didn't talk about this before the air, but you have an announcement about something you're adding to your toolbox. That's going to be, it's already online now, and it's going to be in print edition?
Yes, I'm happy to say that, somebody shared with me at one time that we all have a book inside us. And so a number of months ago, I really committed to writing that book. And I'm happy to say that the book entitled Wantrepreneur, Do You Have What It Takes to Be an Entrepreneur, was released through Amazon and Kindle 2 weeks ago and hit bestseller in 3 different categories.
And there it is, a round of applause. Yeah, wow, it's going viral all of a sudden. Yeah,
and that wasn't rehearsed. So good for you, Rich.
I know, right? Yeah,
and it will be released in hard copy within a couple weeks. And as we'll find out, the person who I'm honored to have stepped up and accepted to write the foreword is with us in studio.
In the studio, nice.
Yeah.
Well, let's get underway, but I'm sure listeners listen throughout the show. Just let folks know how they get in touch with you and find out about you as the host for the show.
Yeah, the easiest way, since it's social media, is LinkedIn. So just type in Mark, M-A-R-K, myette, M-Y-E-T-T-E, through the old technology of telephone, 404-931-3264.
All right, and if we had phone lines, they'd be lighting up right now, I'm sure. And we'll have all that on the show notes as well as you're listening to the podcast. So let's jump in and welcome our guest to the studio here.
Yeah, we're happy to say that, as I mentioned, we have 2 great guests. So we're going to have a really wonderful conversation with our 2 guests. The first person I noted that wrote the foreword for my book is with us, Tom-Darrow. Tom is as we'll find out with his background, is not only a accomplished business person, also an accomplished entrepreneur. He went from, as he'll share with you, what his journey was, and also a legend in the industry of human resource or capital management. Human capital, I think we call it now. In some circles.
Capital, human resources, humor resources.
Yes.
A lot of different things. Yeah.
A lot of those things. And then we're also joined by Marilyn Santiago.
Yeah, returning guest.
Yes, returning guest. The response was so positive, they said, bring Marilyn back. And so, as we'll find out from Marilyn, she is also very active in Georgia State University, specifically the Robinson School of Business. So, Marilyn, wonderful having you back.
Thank you very much for having me. Look forward to it.
So, before we get into the guests, I mean, and this will relate to some of the dynamic out there. But for those that decide to download the book on Kindle, Wantrepreneur, Do You Have What It Takes to Be an Entrepreneur? We talk about the economy and the evolution of our economy. Mark Butler was raising his hands in the air, saying our unemployment and this was last week, was the lowest it's been in 8 years. The reality of it is, which we'll hear from our guests, is that might not be the case because there's a lot more people that are affected than the state or certain folks like to really purport. But we have a guest today. We'll first start with Marilyn. We're going to start with you.
Okay.
So, Marilyn, you've been in human capital or HR in your role for how many years now?
Do I have to say?
Yes.
I've been in HR probably close to 30 years. And then I took a sidebar opportunity and ended up at Georgia State, which I absolutely love. re-energized myself, regenerated my skills and my abilities, and focus on job seekers. I've done it in the community for a very long time. Of course, we did it in the human resource role with companies such as GE, Honeywell, and ADP, and decided that I liked helping job seekers. When you help job seekers, you empower a whole family, and you empower many lives. And so I started doing it in the community as well. Georgia State heard about that, picked me up, and I've been helping Robinson College of Business graduate students in the role of finding their place in this economy and in their careers.
So since we're all gifts wrapped in flesh, how did you get into the human resource area?
Well, quite honestly, when I was growing up, it was very obvious from my dad coming home every evening that when you're in HR, the personnel lady would always help make my dad's job much better by helping with benefits and payroll and making sure those things were taken care of and that the days off he had, that they were right. And when he was laid off, she was the one who called for them to come back. I realized that person had an impact on families. And I decided that human resources was the way I wanted to go. At that time, it was personnel. And since that time, I keep that in mind, that any decision that I make, I want to make sure that it's consistent and fair. They may not agree with it, but they understand it, and I want to make sure that it's the right decision. So when they're sitting around the table talking about their personnel lady, that the information is good, the conversation is wonderful, and that the family understands what's going on.
And since we do talk about, and one of the dynamics is that people will go through, at a minimum, 3 career reboots, you will.
At least 3.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to probably get fired by at least 1 or 2. Am I right, Tom? At least. And that's okay, because that helps you get to the next step. What I found when I help people find jobs, particularly those in companies, that when they're laid off, 90% of those folks end up finding a job that they really should have been in the first place, that they always wanted to do but were afraid to do so. And so this kind of kicked them into the job that they really wanted to do all along but were afraid to leave that comfortable paycheck, that 9-to-5 paycheck. And so now that they're forced to do something else, they've taken the opportunity to be an entrepreneur and take a risk and be successful on something they've always wanted to do.
And also there's since we all have, or I won't speak for you, Marilyn, because you definitely do not. But I do have a face for radio, and so you don't see what I'm wearing. And I have a lapel pin that says "Be courageous."
That's correct.
And so, how does courage play into, making that decision, and how do you coach people around that?
That's funny that you should say that, because on my signature, I always put be strong and be of good courage, because it takes courage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to have belief in yourself. You have to have belief that, you'll make the right decisions for yourself if you listen to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think courage is very important in making a career change, but also in staying in the position that you're in. It's a conscious decision. You just don't fall into it and let the chips roll where they may. I think you have to actually make a decision and then stick with it.
And and I'm sure because of your coaching and counseling that you do at GSU, Robinson School of Business, do you ever have conversations with someone and they will start it off or interject in the conversation, but I'm very risk averse?
Yes.
How do you help people that are at that emotional phase?
Well, you have to be smart about it. You have to take a real look at your skills and abilities and what that can transfer into in this new role that you're trying to get, that you desire. And if you're not realistic on who you are and what you're able to accomplish, you won't be successful. But if you take those skills and ability and apply them and then continue to be educated by those around you, get mentors, go back to school, do something that keeps you in the mix of what's really happening in your field, you will be successful. If you don't do that, you won't be successful.
And in keeping with this Who Moved My Cheese, one of the key tenets, if you do not evolve, you can become extinct. How has Georgia State's Robinson School of Business evolved?
Oh, quite wonderfully. As a matter of fact, we spend an awful lot of time empowering our students by working with employers in the community, experts in the community that are in the industries that the students are mostly interested in, and we try to bring those as many employers into the school and work with our students. We do an awful lot of executive career coaching, and we have a program called Executive Career Coaching, where executives for different fields come in and spend 45 minutes, and the student leads the conversation to talk about that particular industry. And we're starting a new program. We're piloting it this next month, as a matter of fact, called Panthership, where students will go into a business and spend a day just shadowing a person and finding out what that job really does entail. If you're interested in finance but you're not quite sure which area of finance, this gives you an opportunity to go in, spend some time with the student that's doing the internship there, as well as a finance person, a couple of finance people, as well as the HR person. And so you'll walk out of there learning and knowing a little bit more about the different areas, actually what the job really entails. So Panthership is our next plight to help folks in deciding what career they want to go into, including entrepreneurship.
Good for you. And, what is the typical profile now of the Georgia State School of Business student?
We are very fortunate because I handle the graduate school. And most of our students, I say 90% of our students actually work during the day. So most of our classes begin at either 4:30 or 5:30 or 7:15 in the evening. That allows you to work during the day, even take internships during the day, and have school at night. And we also have programs that meet only on Saturdays, so that students can work during the day and go to school on Saturdays.
And age ranges, what do you see?
It varies. We have them right out of undergrad to that our students who've been working for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Our executive MBA students have been working for many years, 10 plus years, sometimes 20 plus, and have decided to come back to sharpen their skills.
Good for you. And so how did you end up at Georgia State in your own evolution?
Well, Georgia State Robinson was very interested in doing a different way of coaching. And one of the things they thought would be important, instead of having someone that grew up in the career coaching, advising world, is to find someone that came from industry, that understood job seeking, that understood what employers are looking for, that actually did it. When my students study Six Sigma, I can talk about Six Sigma because I am Six Sigma certified. And I worked with lean manufacturing while I was at Genie, so I can talk about lean as opposed to someone who just read about it. And so those things help when we're coaching our students, that we've been there, we've done that, we understand what it takes to be in that industry, and we understand what skills and abilities you need, what your resume needs to look like, and who you need to talk to in the community.
And both you and Tom, and we're going to be hearing from Tom in another minute or two, are very active also in an association in the greater Atlanta area, right?
SHRM, most definitely. I have been working with Career Connections with SHRM for a very long time, helping HR people find positions in the community and connecting them to significant HR experts who can work with them and spend some time with them and coach them on an individual basis.
And how has, and I'll assume it's evolved a little bit, or how is it evolving, or how do you see it changing?
Well, currently we're taking a look at it and saying, how can we be more effective? How can we reach every single person out there that's interested in human resources and give them a real-life experience and help boost their careers? And so we're taking the second look. Instead of just having a meeting every other month and having experts come in and talk about various subjects, how can we take that to the next level? And we're reviewing that currently.
Good. Good. Well, Marilyn, we're going to be hearing from you in a little bit, but until we do, how do people get in contact with you, Marilyn?
Georgia State. My email address is msantiago, MSANTIAGO, at gsu.edu, Great.
Marilyn, thanks for joining us.
Okay,
and which brings us to our next guest, Tom-Darrow, who is, as we'll find out, is a well-accomplished industry leader in his space, especially when we talk about human capital. Tom, it's a pleasure to have you join us. You are a founder of a few different companies, right?
Actually, 3 different companies.
Yes.
It's an honor to be here.
And how did that come to be? Tell us about how the evolution of Tom came to be.
Sure. Well, honestly, I grew up with a father who was a corporate guy, right? And I started my career as a corporate guy. And about 20 years ago, if somebody said, Tom, someday you're going to be an entrepreneur, I would have argued with them. I would say, I don't even know how to spell entrepreneur. So it really evolved, and it evolved by mentors. It evolved by people saying, you ought to go out on your own, and me really resisting that. But then realizing that, actually some of the traits that are part of being an entrepreneur, I really have. And looking way back to my grandfather, who was an entrepreneur, and I'm a lot like him, and he actually founded a drugstore in the 1940s in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and they had a drugstore there for 50 years. And everybody knew him, and it was kind of the place to go, kind of like Starbucks is today, not just for drugs, but for social and for connections and a lot of things like that. So here we are about 17 years later, and I've actually got 3 companies that I'm trying to run.
Yes. Well, and the beauty of that is that you won't be the great thing about business is you bring people on that take specific roles. And what are the 3 companies?
So the legacy company is Talent Connections. We're known for placing HR talent, especially leaders. We've placed the head of recruiting at Mercedes-Benz, at Kimberly-Clark, just as 2 examples. The second business is about 8 years old, and that's Career Spa, and kind of a fun name. And we help people who are in transition. So they're either unemployed or what we call misemployed. So kind of my career passion is to help people who have lost theirs. And I think we've all been in that place in our career where it's time to seek out what is our passion, what's our legacy, where are we now, and then how do we get there. And so that's what Career Spa is all about. And then finally, I have a company called the Leadership Council, counsel as in COUNSEL, and it's based on 2 verses in Proverbs that basically speak to the fact that a fool takes their own advice and a wise person seeks the counsel of many. So it's a peer-to-peer group for Christian business leaders.
Good for you. And what's the one business that you're most excited about besides all 3, right? It's like, which child do you love the most?
Boy, that's a tough question. Now, hopefully my employees from the one that I don't choose aren't listening to this. No, honestly, I love them. I love them all.
Yes.
One of the beauties of it, especially with Talent Connections and Career Spa, is that when the market is really strong, like last year, companies were hiring, we were really busy. When the market's really bad, which we don't like, but when the market's really bad, Career Spa is really busy because a lot of people are getting downsized, and we help those people. So it kind of comes and goes. I really enjoy. Maybe it's the ADHD that I have. I kind of enjoy flitting and floating, amongst all the companies.
So it seems like what you've done is you have complementary offerings, right? So your golf bag, if you will. I don't golf, but it's maybe an appropriate analogy, depending upon what's happening on the course of
That's
life. Right. You have a particular stick that you can pull out of the bag, and you can be a service to the community.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, it's been very helpful. I mean, obviously, as part of being a small business owner and an entrepreneur is to manage the ups and downs of the market and the business. And recruiting, our legacy company, recruiting is just naturally up and down. And so now when it's down, we do have something else we can do, something else that helps make a more consistent revenue stream overall.
So I'm pausing because let me just come right and ask, how old were you when you made the move out of corporate and formed your companies?
I was 32 at the time.
Yeah. And do you see, when you're talking to the Wantrepreneur, or as you like to call it, what do you call it?
Wantrepreneur.
Yes, or the
Or entrepreneur.
Entrepreneur. And what factor does age play in that decision?
I'm not sure age is as much of a factor. I think there are a lot of other factors.
Yep.
I was in a position, I guess, fortunately, where at the time I wasn't married, didn't have kids, didn't have a lot of other obligations, so didn't have a lot of risk, right? So for me to launch on my own, I mean, I literally had to buy a laptop and business cards, and I was up and running. There wasn't that risk there. I mean, if at the end of the day I didn't like it or it didn't work out, well, I could go get a job, right? And at the time, as a recruiting leader in Atlanta, it wasn't that hard to get a job. So to some degree, it wasn't that big of a risk. It was probably more of maybe an ego risk, if anything else. But financially and other ways, it wasn't that big of a risk for me.
But I think also what you alluded to also is you had what I call professional capital. You had a lot of experience in a specific field, and you were very good at it. And you also identified what you enjoyed doing to parlay that, right?
Well, certainly that's huge. And, I had a mentor, it all gets back to mentors, who I sat down with soon after I started the business, who really challenged me in terms of what is the most important aspect of my business. And I thought it was my knowledge of recruiting, because that's what I was bringing to the market as a recruiting consultant. But he politely highlighted the fact that wasn't it. It was really my network, because offering professional services in HR and offering professional services in HR in Atlanta, Georgia, which is the biggest small town in America, it's all about relationships, and it's all about your network and about reputation and about trust. Sure, you have to have good services and good content and good subject matter expertise, but it's all about networking.
Good for you. And what would you say your entrepreneurial fastball is?
Boy, I've never heard that question before. Entrepreneurial fastball. See, I'm used to missing curveballs, so I don't. I think the entrepreneurial fastball that often people swing and miss is just the financial ebbs and flows, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of people can't handle that. Even if at the end of the year they make more money than they ever made in their life, they still can't handle the fact that 1 month you make nothing. Maybe the next month you make nothing, and then the third month, the ship comes in. They just can't handle that up and down.
The ebbs and flows. The
ebbs and flows. Not only from a cash flow management standpoint, but even from just an emotional standpoint. That's hard to deal with sometimes. And even 17 years later, I'm challenged with dealing with that sometimes too.
And the one thing I love about both of our guests is they're very accomplished in their fields, but they're both very humble. And, Tom, you underestimate or you underpromote what your capabilities are, and I've observed it. I'd say you're also very good, besides the networking side, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, is that one of the attributes is sales, right?
Yep.
And
absolutely.
Do you consider yourself to be a, quote, salesperson?
No. In fact, 17 years ago, I took some assessments that basically said Tom can't sell, Tom won't sell. But here we are, right, 17 years later.
Right.
And so for us, it's probably more business development, which, is more of a relational type sale.
Yep.
But, we do believe in what we do, and we love helping clients. We love helping people. We love being that connector,
mm-hmm.
of the two. We love helping people through Career Spa, rediscover their passion and learn how to manage their career. I mean, you go to college, you learn nursing or accounting or marketing. You aren't really taught how to manage your career. What does that look like? Mm-hmm. And how do you optimize that? And what does legacy look like, right? Too often we're trying to build a resume. Well, what about building a legacy? What is that all about? So we do have a passion. So it certainly is easy to sell when you have a passion for what you do. So we're very grateful for that.
And to segue that, I think your strength is relationships.
Thank you.
And establishing long-term relationships.
It's a gift. I can't take credit for it. It's a gift.
Yep. And I think you also brought up another thing, which is legacy and reputation. I had a dear uncle who's still alive. He's 93. His one of his sayings is, and you'll see it in my dedication, where he says, "Years to build a reputation, about 2 seconds to ruin it." And that's always stuck with me. So It seems that's kind of your mantras as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
See it every day on TV, right?
Yeah.
Somebody with a great reputation, all of a sudden, they're starting back at ground zero, trying to rebuild it.
Right. Well, Tom, a pleasure to have you on the program.
Good to be here.
So because you're so diverse, what's the best way from a reach-out standpoint for people to reach out to you?
I would say start with LinkedIn. Yep. Tom-Darrow. Darrow is D as in dog, and then arrow. There are two types of people in the world today, those who are LinkedIn and those who are linked out. And so I would encourage you to be LinkedIn and find me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to link with you.
Excellent. Tom, thanks for joining us. And
My
so
pleasure.
Let's bring Marilyn back into the conversation. Marilyn,
Yes.
as you were listening to our discussion anything come to mind or any comments that came up?
Yes, the number one comment that came up for me was passion. And I have to tell you that I've known Tom-Darrow for many years, one-on-one exchange as well as watching from the sidelines. And one of the things he does best is take a look with HR folks in whatever situation they're in and listen and give you the greatest advice you could possibly get. Even when he thinks you're going off in the deep end and your ideas are a little kooky, he won't tell you that, but he will steer you into the right direction. And I think that's what's allowed him to be so successful and to have the reputation that he has in the city. He's everywhere. Because aren't you talking to SHRM somewhere in the next week?
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow, but I'll be there.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
So, and he's well sought after at all levels of HR.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so, Tom brings up a good example, which is that entrepreneurship, in many ways, is made complicated by textbooks and the whole concept of it. And at the end of the day, it's very simple, right? It's about running a business. The other thing I think that Tom brings as an example is his diversification approach, but it's aligned businesses. One of the businesses I have is Entrepreneur Consulting and Coaching. And then another business I have is the Entrepreneur Source. But the objective will be is meet my clients where they are. And if I listen to what, Tom, you were describing, it's kind of the same approach. You meet your clients where they are.
That's right.
And it could be one of 3 different offerings. And that's
good coaching.
Yeah.
That's good coaching as well.
Yeah.
You can't instill in someone what you want them to do. You have to listen to find out what they want to do.
Right.
And sometimes they know it. They just need someone to confirm it for them.
Yeah, here's another key in that, though, too, is that, I didn't start all 3 businesses at the same time, right? I see oftentimes people maybe who fail in starting a business is that they try to do too much too soon. I remember there were some folks probably 15 years ago now that were very highly respected in HR in Atlanta. There were 4 of them that set out on their own. They started their own business. And the first thing I saw was a one-pager where they listed the services that they were going to offer. Well, literally, there were like 50 different services on this page. And it's almost as if they went to the SHRM website and pulled off every HR service that there is. Well, they lasted about 2 months because I think the market heard that as, no, wait a minute, so you can do all these things, but you're not an expert in any of them. And that's obviously not a message you can send. So first you have to go to market with, what does the market need, but also what are you an expert in? Get that solidified, and then maybe start adding some complementary services or businesses to supplement, what you're doing and what the market needs in addition to the first offering.
And which I'm going to bring up a question which I like to ask in each of our programs, and I'd appreciate your opinion. Do you believe that entrepreneurs are born or made?
Well, I know they're all born.
That's true.
Well, okay.
Well,
but I know what you're saying.
Tom's also quick.
Right. Yes. I know they're all born. I heard that from John Maxwell. Same thing with leaders. Are they born? Well, they're all born. No, I think that I think it's both. Right. I think that there are some people that certainly have a big propensity to it and competency. But I think even today, 17 years in, I'm being remade every day. And, the best way to be made usually, unfortunately, is to fail and then pick yourself up and heal. And, as we know, a broken bone heals twice as strong. And so I think my next book is going to be probably around failure and around, the results from that and success out of that. And, fail forward. We all fail, but we need to fail forward. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's sort of a kind of a level set competency within the entrepreneur, a person that's really necessary.
Yeah, I believe they're born, and they can be made, and usually they're made because of a life-changing event that occurs that either forces them to become an entrepreneur, or a frustration with something or something they have seen or witnessed that they did not like, and pushes them into doing it because that's how they feel that they will propel and make a difference in this world. So I think entrepreneurs are both.
And research kind of vets that out. That indicates that entrepreneurial attributes are baked in by the time you're 14 years old. Now, whether, to your point, Marilyn, people decide to leverage those attributes immediately or at a younger age, small percentage of the population, probably less than 2%, are of the Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey wiring, right? Mm-hmm. But that means there's 98% of the rest of the population that probably to a certain extent is wired a certain way that might lean towards some attribute or more than one attribute that's entrepreneurial. The same studies indicate that people over 40 that decide to start flexing those entrepreneurial attributes generally, statistically, are more successful at an entrepreneur venture than someone younger. What are your thoughts about that?
I don't know. I see it on both sides.
Yep.
These new millennials, they're really looking at entrepreneurial. They have entrepreneurial attributes,
yep.
And they're not. They're willing to take the risk because they don't have anything to lose. Similar to what you said when you were younger, you weren't married. You could go out there and the risk wasn't that big financially or otherwise. Some of them probably still live at home, but they know that they want to do what they want to do and how they want to do it. They don't want to be told what to do. So the first thing they think about is what skills do they have to go out there and make a difference. And sometimes I think, though, however, that their reasoning is not about making a difference in the world. It's just about satisfying their needs and their desires for having a certain type of career and lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I'll respond too. So, I think most of us grow up thinking and learning that the American dream is to own your own home and own your own business. Well, owning your own business can also be the American nightmare, right? If you're not called to do it, if it's not meant for you. So, I agree. I think some of the younger folks, it's almost like getting married. I mean, sometimes you just need to get married when you're 18 and just have somebody set you up and go for it, right? And you don't have all the baggage that you have when you get married like I did at age 42. So sometimes there's that. But then I think, when you start a business in your 40s and your 50s, well, you're bringing a lot of other things to the table. Obviously, experience and wisdom and network, maybe financial resources, again, the mistakes and the learning from those mistakes. So you do bring a lot more. So I think it's different for everybody, in terms of what is their place in their life, in their family, in their business, and is this really the right time, and are you the right person to really launch out on your own?
I think about my dad again. When his generation, it's 9 to 5. You have to have a job and stay and get a pension. Well, we all know what happened with pensions. And so that our generation came out and said, okay, I'll get my pension, and then I'll start my business. And this generation, I think, says, let me just start my business. Let me get all the knowledge I can get from school or from experiences with family, friends, or just desires, and let me just jump in and try it, see what happens. And I think that's a difference in the generations.
The interesting thing is I had a conversation with someone, and it might have been here at a previous program talking about the concept of failure. And in the United States, it's a cultural thing. In the United States, people celebrate failure to a certain extent, right? To the point where I think there's an event this week called Failure Lab.
Yes.
That's celebrating failure. The person had an interesting observation, which is in Europe, in Great Britain, failure is perceived very differently. People are sometimes shamed and shunned for trying something that did not succeed. So as a result, culturally, people are a lot more risk averse because of the stigma with, they were in a business and it failed, and and people get very timid about that. But I think from the United States standpoint, it's almost a cultural thing. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think it's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Because we all fail.
Right.
So we either recognize that, embrace it, learn from it, or we're going to constantly seek perfection to a fault. I remember interviewing a college student one time, and when they're in college, they don't have that much experience that you can ask questions about. So you ask questions like, well, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Well, I asked this one student, what are some of your weaknesses? And he thought for a minute, and he said, I don't have any. I thought, really? Oh, wow. Okay, great. Well,
That's
you can't,
typical.
Yeah, you can't come to work for us because we all have weaknesses. So I think just recognizing, being real, being humble, is so key to being authentic and especially again as a small business owner, you've got to, unless you have the brand of Coca-Cola and Google and Microsoft, your brand is you, right? And so you've got to come across to others as trustworthy and caring, and not just that you're out to sell something.
Right. Know thyself, and then surround yourself with people that are different than you, so that your weaknesses are picked up by someone who has it as a strength. I'm sure, and I've seen you do that in your companies.
Oh, okay.
Hire some folks that definitely complement you, but folks that are very different than you, and that allow you to explore other opportunities that are out there in the HR job-seeking world.
Well, that's the best team, right? A bunch of people who are different but complementary that can all move forward toward a common vision.
Now, since we're talking about folks in transition or just the general economy, the economy has recovered in a very interesting way than previous recoveries. In your line of work and what you're doing in the community and within your businesses or in the school, are you seeing anything within the economy and those in transition that are vulnerable? And who are the vulnerable ones that you're seeing at this point?
I think a lot of it comes down to your skills. Are they up to date? And that's so challenging because the speed of change now is so fast that it's just so hard to keep up with the skills, especially in technology and healthcare in certain fields. And then I think the other key thing, especially in Atlanta and other big cities, is the network. People historically have gone out to network if they're in sales or they're unemployed. Mm-hmm. Well, now networking has become a core competency for business, right, for success. And so I think the people, whether the economy is good or bad, the people that have the up-to-date skills and robust networks are going to do fine, right? They're going to flourish. They're going to be in demand. The economy last year, the hiring was off the charts good. We place HR talent, and it's sort of a leading indicator. If companies are hiring HR talent, they're getting ready to hire other people. Well, now this year, we're only a couple months in, but it has really slowed. It's really changed back the way it was for about 6 years. So I think the toughest thing I know for us is trying to predict, right? I mean, if you say, Tom, it's going to be a bad year, well, I can figure out how to operate within that. If you say, Tom, it's going to be a good year, well, I appreciate that even better, but I can operate within that. If you say, Tom, we have no idea what's going to happen this year, the economy, the stock market, the elections, well, that's hard to deal with. Do you invest? Do you hold back? What do you do? And that's sort of where we are right now, is I see a lot of pause and a lot of kind of holding back and concern right now in hiring.
And we're joined today by two great guests, Marilyn Santiago with the Georgia State University Robinson School of Business, Graduate School of Business, Tom-Darrow, who is a entrepreneur in his own making, 3 different companies in the human capital space as well, and this is mark-myette. And I call myself an alternative career coach, not the traditional career coach as we know it. What about... from a demographic, what are you seeing as it relates to people that have a tremendous amount of professional capital? They might be in their late 40s, early 50s, and they're at that, what I call that professional fork in the road. What are you seeing in regard to their prospects and their opportunities today?
What we're seeing on the education side is that they're coming back to school and they want to take courses that are definitely going to impact their jobs immediately, their careers immediately, not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now, but immediately. And so the professors that we have to have are folks that are in the business, who understand business, and have specialty, so they can take those students to the next level. They're not looking for a typical classroom. So we have to bring in the experts. And currently, the areas that are most intriguing and that are growing the fastest are IT, data analytics, and definitely healthcare IT especially, and cyberspace, correct? Cybersecurity. And so we're spending an awful lot of time in those areas and focusing, bringing those type of experts from the from the community into the school. And that seems to be the best approach in getting that level of folks to go through school, change their careers, and have an impact on the areas that they would like to have impact on.
Okay. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing with the, if you will, the older worker is, if you look at people's degrees in college, there are only like 110, 120 different degrees that you can get. And yet there are tens of thousands of occupations, right? So most people are not working anymore, especially at age 40, 50. They're not working anymore in their area of degree, right? Like HR.
That's correct.
80-some% of people in HR did not start in HR, just as an example. So I think part of what's happening is that there's so many choices these days that people get stuck, knowing where to go. And so then they don't go anywhere, or they fall back into the same paradigms and into the same roles, and they get stuck. And so again, what we love to do is to really help people take a time out, take a blank sheet of paper and say, what if, right? What if money weren't the option? What if you broke down the barriers? What's your passion? What do you really want to do? And now maybe you can't do that now, but you can certainly do it at some point. And we point out examples from Ray Kroc to Colonel Sanders to Vince Lombardi, a lot of people who started after age 50 what we know them for, right? So they had big impact even though they didn't start it till after age 50. Sam Walton is another example,
Yep.
all kinds of examples.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the key is to identify, where you're heading and then rekindle the passion to get there.
And it's interesting. I had 3 conversations as recently as yesterday. A 50-something-year-old, a 60-something-year-old, and then also somebody that was 49. Financial services in transition, an artist, that spent the last 8 years perfecting her art. And then the third person, which probably the most impactful conversation I had, was a commanding officer, retired admiral in the Navy, who is, you can look at their eyes and see that they're just in stress. Mm-hmm. Here's a person that was a admiral, commanding officer of a naval fleet, who went to some resume service, and they decided to put in his title, layman terms, what his role was, and they decided your role, you should call this director of personnel, commanding officer, rear admiral, 24 years retired, and it's very striking to me what's going on out there in probably isolated instances, but it just tells me that there's just a lot going on that's underneath the radar.
But that's also, I think about the coaching, and Tom sees it all the time.
Yep.
I see people who've gone to folks that have led them in the wrong direction,
Yeah.
and it's because the people did not listen to what they want. This person really was all about, and didn't understand it. And some of that is because they weren't experienced enough themselves. Mm-hmm. That's a difference from going to an experienced coach versus one that just decided to read a book and decided, I can do that, or help their friends or their neighbors and figured they could get into the coaching business, and they're really not ready they're able to do that. For someone like that, we would never have advised of that. I see it all the time, particularly in resumes. Some of the worst resumes are a result of someone that went to someone who's supposed to be an expert. And that's why go to a real coach.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, and we've talked about the word passion. Passion comes from the heart. A lot of our career decisions come from the head, right? Where am I going to make good money?
Right.
Where am I going to feed my ego? Et cetera, et cetera. And so I think there needs to be a balance there. But I think as we get older, we start connecting more and more to our heart in our career, and what's the legacy and what's the passion, from that standpoint. How do we make a difference in the world? Not just how do I make money to pay the bills.
Mm-hmm. That's true, because for me, HR was the money. Mm-hmm. But the job-seeking portion of it, helping job seekers, was the passion. And as the years went on, the passion took over from the HR interest.
Awesome.
But you combine the two. You have to combine what your passion is and what can make money, because you do have to live. Mm-hmm. And so you have to figure out how to combine both of those. And I think that's where a good coach can help. And at Robinson, we have great coaches. Our coaches come from industry versus growing up through the career coaching world.
And since we're on the topic of coaching, because I'm sure all of the businesses you're involved in and your roles is very coach-centric, right?
Yes, most definitely.
So
not counseling, coaching.
Right. And so since we're on the topic of coaching, how do you figure out if somebody's a good coach?
Passion, experience, how they listen, how they transfer that information from the job seeker to actually, are they leading that job seeker, or are they allowing that job seeker to find their way? Are they empowering the job seeker to get to the point that they need to get to the lifestyle they really want? Are they infusing their own beliefs and ideas as opposed to letting the job seeker find their way? And you're just guiding them. I think that's a good coach.
Yeah, I think those are great. I would add certification. I think to be an executive coach, you need to be certified today. I mean, you don't know too many attorneys that haven't passed the bar exam, right? And so I think that's true. The other are testimonials, right? Talking to people who have been coached by the person and making sure. I mean, there are even great coaches that aren't right for you. Right, and
That's
so
correct.
there are different styles, different approaches, different chemistries. So if somebody out there is thinking about getting a coach, my recommendation is to find 2 or 3, meet with each one of them for 20 minutes or so, 30 minutes, even if you have to pay to meet with them, and really get to know their methodology, their approach, their style, their chemistry, and then pick the best one.
And if you're in business school, go to your career coach at your business school.
Good for you.
Had to throw that in there.
Yeah. And Tom, you brought up earlier in the conversation the topic of mentors. It seems like that's had a major impact on your professional career and also subsequently your legacy, right?
It's been huge. We've always heard to get a mentor. Well, I think that's old teaching, right? It's now you need mentors. You need many. And I think of individuals who have been and are mentors to me. I think of my company board of advisors. I think of my leadership council group. I think of coaches that I've used in the past. I guess I'm just really in need for a lot of help. But it's amazing how you just glean great ideas and wisdom from these people that have walked somewhat in the path that I'm walking or I'm about to walk. And not that they've done it perfectly. I think of when my wife and I 8 years ago went to get married. One of the first things we did was we thought, okay, who are the 4 or 5 couples that we know that, as far as we know, they have a really good marriage? And we sat down with them, and we said, what makes a good marriage? And all of them said, we struggled, right? At some point we struggled, and here's what we learned. And so it was amazing to sit down with those people and learn, what finally now has made a really good marriage for them.
So you also say you have an advisory board.
Board of advisors
Yep.
for the businesses, yes.
And how do you select the board of advisors?
I try to get a cross-section of people that bring, whether it's marketing expertise or entrepreneur expertise or connections or, what are the key things I'd like to get counsel on or wisdom? What are some of the key issues that might come up through the year where I want to go to them, for advice? Certainly try to get people that are like-minded. Maybe they share my faith. They are in the space. Certainly in Atlanta, I like to meet face-to-face. So it's a pretty good cross-section of people. But, and I don't pay them, to be on the board of advisors. I usually do make a donation at the end of the year to a charity in their name. But, boy, they love to help me to help others. They love to meet each other, so that they get some things out of it too. And now in turn, I've turned and I've served on board of directors, board of advisors. And, again, I haven't gotten paid for any of them. But, boy, I love helping, right? Love helping to enable another person or another organization to do the things that I'm also passionate about, but I can't do 24 hours a day. But they're doing it, so maybe I can help them do it better.
And how did you formalize that at all? I mean, is there formality to that advisory group?
There pretty much is. Once a quarter we meet. We do have an agenda. I mean, I share financial things. I share what's working, what's not. So, yeah, there's a pretty structured agenda, but like any good entrepreneur, there's got to be time for open talk and dialogue and brainstorming. So we have some of that too.
That's great. That's a great best practice.
It's worked for me. It's been amazing.
Yeah.
And the price is right too. So.
Well, it's all about the sense I get is a very pay it forward approach. Both of you have a very pay it forward mentality, which speaks to the folks that you associate with.
Well,
right?
thank you. Like associating with you. And happy birthday, by the way, too.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Good to be here on your birthday.
Yeah, most definitely.
Had to get that in.
Thank you very much. The better we are, the older we get, the better we were, right?
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Where's the happy birthday song?
Well, we'd play that, but there's actually royalty fees associated
Not anymore.
with that. Yeah.
Not anymore.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that his update?
Supreme Court.
Oh, they passed that?
Yep. It's not a royalty anymore, so
Oh,
go
so-
play it before we leave.
We'll have to sing it because I don't have it queued up, yeah.
And what about you, Marilyn? I mean, we were talking about advisory groups, and what do you are you involved in any mentor groups or?
Oh, most definitely. I think that's really important, not just at your job, but I think volunteering is key. If you volunteer, you impact an awful lot of people.
Right.
And they know that you're really meaning it and you really care about it because you're volunteering. And I think that volunteering many times leads to other opportunities because people see an integrity. I once received a position from a gentleman who had a company that was based in Dubai and in England, and by LinkedIn, as a matter of fact. And he saw me and he didn't approach me just because of my HR background, but it was the integrity, it was the things I volunteered for that he said that stood out for him, that showed that I cared about people, I cared about what I did, I had a passion, and that would seal the deal for me, to be his North American rep. And it really made a difference in how we, from that point on, how we hired other people. They had to have some type of demonstrated volunteering experiences.
And this goes back to a comment that was made earlier in our conversation about advice and counsel. What's the best counsel or piece of advice you received from a mentor or from somebody that gave you the courage to do something that others perceived as risky?
For me, it was the phrase baby steps. Remember the movie What About Bob, right, where he's taking baby steps? You know, so often we hear these great plans and we hear that, oh, look what Steve Jobs did and Bill Gates did, and we think, oh, we could never do that, right? Well, I still remember about 18 years ago walking into the first SHRM Atlanta board meeting thinking, what in the world am I doing here? Look at all these impressive people here. And then a few years later, I'm president of the SHRM Atlanta organization, and now I'm chair of the board of the SHRM Foundation nationally, you know. And so you just have to take baby steps and get to, you know, where there is no risk, there is no faith, right? And so you just have to have faith, take a step, figure it out, excel in it, take the next step, and keep going. And so that's, you know, you have the goal out there, you have to know where you're trying to get to, but then you take the big gulp and take the first step.
I think it's be true to thyself. You know, add on what you don't know. Just if an opportunity presents itself, think about what it will do for you and for others, and try it. Give it a try. I mean, you know what direction you're going to if you know yourself and you're willing to take risks in that fashion. I think it'll fall in place for you. When your gut tells you that it's not right, listen to your gut and step away. And that's what I do. If it's going to add to my knowledge, if it's going to add to my talent, if it's going to continue me as a people connector, if it's going to impact other lives, if it's going to impact my life, maybe financially, or maybe just in the realm of getting to know other people, or learning another thing. That's the direction I use.
Well, Marilyn, Santiago, and also tom-darrow, thanks for joining us today. And we're going to do a quick round robin, and so you can remind people how they can best reach out to you. And then Rich and I will just wrap the show up. But a pleasure having you today, and look forward to having you on a future program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Marilyn's Santiago for LinkedIn, and of course msantiago@gsu.edu.
And for me, it's Tom Darrow on LinkedIn, or the email is tomdarrow@talentconnections.net. Great
having you. And this is Mark Myette, and the best way to reach me is through LinkedIn, MarkMyette. Rich, what a great program we had today.
I'm telling you, I really enjoyed it, and just both guest perspectives. I mean, if you're not listening to it live, which we have about 4,000 people I'm seeing here on our account, but then and social media has been blowing up, as they say, and it'll just continue. So if you're listening to this podcast, definitely share it with some folks. I mean, there's just a wealth of knowledge and content in here. Like, I think you're getting better at this as each show moves forward, right? Yes or yes?
Well, you just have to keep swinging the bat, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we do want to kind of turn your attention to Mark, and we know how to get in touch with you. But tell us, what keeps you busy these days? And we mentioned your book is now on Amazon. And how would they find that?
They can go to Kindle and just type in Wantre, and then all of a sudden that will pop up. So Wantrepreneur, Wantrepreneur. And the book is called Wantrepreneur, Do You Have What It Takes to Be an Entrepreneur? And actually what drove me to write the book was I've been doing what I've been doing with the Entrepreneur Source for 3.5 years. But I've seen a pattern where people like to put people in boxes. And so they just assume that I'm there to sell somebody a business in a box or a franchise. And that's not my wiring. I'm kind of what we've heard from Tom and Marilyn about helping people get to a point of clarity to figure out, is now a time to do something entrepreneurial. And so the motivation to write the book was, there's a lot of books about how to start a business, how to be an entrepreneur, how to do 10 top businesses to start out of the home, business on a shoestring. What there isn't out there is to meet people where they are emotionally and mentally and professionally. Is like, how do you figure out, do you fit on this, we define as the entrepreneurial band? And the book goes into a lot more detail about what's actually on the entrepreneurial band. And then how do you begin to determine and learn at least about what are the pros and cons of each type of entrepreneurial opportunity on that band, and then how to begin to discern through a formal process where you might be predisposed. And so for prospective clients that I work with that are at that fork in the road, I ask them, just go to Amazon, download the book, a whole 99 cents, and if they have a big enough, as I call it, professional rock in their shoe, they'll actually take time to read the book. And then there should be some aha moments. And then usually from that opens up dialogue that would allow me to really get to know where they're at. And as I like to say, I like to meet my clients where they are at. And the book is a great way to help people determine where they might be at.
And speaking about your clients and folks listening to the show podcast, what are some kind of trigger points or key indicators of somebody that would kind of raise their hand and would look to engage with you, or folks that you seek out?
Well,
a good fit?
Yeah, a good fit is anyone that is either literally in a hard career transition where they're no longer working, or they have been banging their head up against the wall thinking they need to get a job in a particular field, and they're just running into dead ends. It might be someone that might be currently employed. The military calls those folks retired on active duty or roads, right? Yeah. But what they're doing is they're making everyone's life around them miserable. They're themselves are miserable, and they're making their families miserable to the point where people in their 40s and 50s today have a epidemic level of depression, addiction, and suicide. So it's not worth it to do that. So those folks that are really feeling any stress professionally, that have this U2 song playing, right. I still haven't found what I'm looking for, and I'm thinking maybe I might want to start something. That's the ideal client. Or
maybe a family member that says, man, I need to get this person out of the house.
Right.
Mark a call, right? Yeah.
Right.
So we don't have it is your birthday, as you see up on the screen, and folks have noted in the studio here. It's on Twitter. But we didn't have the birthday song. I didn't realize, we do have a gift here for you, but we didn't realize we couldn't play the birthday song. So better than that, we just upped it here. And we'll show this on our posting. Oh, wow, there it is.
Tom,
it's the...
There it is, the book.
All right,
book. Very
it is.
Nice,
Wow.
very nice.
Wow. Congratulations.
Oh, and the award, yeah.
Congratulations.
All right.
And the crowd goes wild with applause. We're going to have lots of photos of this on the site. So there it is, your first copy off the press.
Wow.
Excellent.
Dang.
Nice.
That's a milestone.
Sharp.
And delivered on your birthday. Have you had a better birthday present in the past?
I would say that this is fairly emotional.
Okay.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Nice. Well, we're very proud of you and what you've contributed to folks. And again, we don't have the birthday song, but we did bring in just for you. We are landing your private helicopter right now, as you can hear. It's landing to take you off to whatever destination you want to go, Vegas or your next book signing tour. So, Mark, why don't you send everybody home and thank everyone for being on the show, and to our next episode.
And Rich and everybody, what a great program today. Probably the best one ever.
I concur.
And Marilyn, Santiago, Tom-Darrow, great being with you. And Dr. Casanova, thank you so much for all you do behind the scenes. This is Mark-myette from Atlanta, GA, signing off and wishing you the best.
Thank you again for joining Mark-myette and his guests on the Pro Business Channel. Use the social media links here to share today's show and stay tuned for the next episode of Wantrepreneur Radio.